You were the chosen one! It was said that you would destroy this Sith, not join them! Bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness!
The official car of the high school parking lot, let's talk about how to modify the Infiniti G35. Now, you might be thinking, Alex, why did you already start slandering the platform? Okay, I don't plan on going to any street takeovers, and to that I say, listen, when I see a news article about street takeovers and an Infiniti G35 is not in one of the photos, then you have my permission to argue. The Infiniti G35, the official car that resembles Season 8 of Game of Thrones. The car that was birthed into this world in 2003 and across the pond was named the Nissan Skyline. The strongest argument that any of these owners have to being related to the car name, okay? Which made everyone under the age of 24 want one because, well, you get the point. I actually wanted one because I thought it was a Skyline too, okay? I was young. But just like most marketing, the predecessor of the G20 and this G35 shared very little in common. Intended to be the contender for the Acura TL, A4, IS, C-Class, and even the 3 Series, but at a lower price point. And since it was assembled in Tochigi, Japan, this meant that you could hypothetically argue on MySpace that your car was JDM inspired. But here's the thing. The platform's actually bang on. The weakest power plants of this car came with a base 260 horsepower, and the 2005 to 2007 coupes could get you 298 horsepower, which was near identical to the 2005 WRX STI, and 21 more than the Mitsubishi Evo of the same year. Except Infiniti gave you a VQ35DE engine, which came in the sporty coupe called the 350Z. Before the days of slander, this car was, and probably still is, a fantastic pick if you don't plan to modify one. The wheelbase of the car gives you an insane fun driving experience. The S chassis, but it's got nicer interior. The 6-speed manual is fun and isn't loosey-goosey or overtly German like the transmission you'd find in an A4 or A6. And you've even got the G35X, where X is all-wheel drive that use the same technology as the other Skylines and even some elements of the GTR. And at its peak, it was getting drifted by Team Falcon with 2 snails and a bunch of angle. Truth be told, that's a real story. The Infiniti G35 was the car to buy in the early 2010s, and then something got weird, but we'll get into that because you're not here to know about how to own one or the history. You're here to figure out how to modify this Nissan in a suit. So how do you modify an Infiniti G35? Well, grab your notebooks and let's get at it. And remember, if you want anything for your car, G35 or otherwise, come check out Martini Works, where we have the best price on coilovers, intakes, wheels, and tires. And this one is actually ran by people that love the community. If you have a chance, try to stay in the 2005 to 2006 Infiniti G35. You'll just have a better baseline for interior parts like genuine aluminum trim pieces and higher quality general components. 2005 to 2006, okay? You won't get the Brembo brakes. You don't really need them, okay? But you really don't even want them. The viscous limited slip differential and the upgraded power is worth the sacrifice. Just trust us on this one. And remember that you've got a heavy coupe that either needs less weight or more power. And since even the rev-up engines are naturally aspirated, you're a little stuck until you throw a turbocharger on there if you want to spend that amount of money on these cars. For intakes, we recommend an AFE. It's about $360, or InGen, you can get a dual cool one for $440. Both of these brands almost always have stock, whereas the Weapon R, those brands, they really never do. So you might be wondering, why do G35, 350Zs, and 370Zs sound bad with an aftermarket exhaust? It's the trombone joke. It's like the what the f is that noise as you're going, rolling down a cruise or a meet or anything like that. And that, my friend, is a lack of back pressure on an otherwise unflattering exhaust manifold design. And because these cars sit in a chunk of vehicles that I will dub the buffet of car purchasing.
Car buffet. Cars that are cheap, made in mass volume, and are usually the first or second purchase of a person wanting to buy a fun car. These cars look like a freshly legal 18-year-old up and down and say, hey baby, let me f up your insurance. I promise I won't skip your freshly burnt Travis Scott CD of Utopia.
End quote of the definition of a car buffet. The G35 need resonators, and so do the 350Z, 370Zs. So when you go into modifying your exhaust, keep a resonator or a high flow cat of some kind. It will almost like bass out the sound, if you will. Loud isn't better with this car. Tone is better. And I've actually seen MagnaFlow offer decent systems for about $1,800, and the cheaper alternatives like NVIDIA being about $1,250. First person to buy an exhaust from Martini Works gets a kiss on the exhaust from me, yours truly. It's kind of gross, but take what what you want. You'll get about 10 extra horsepower though from an exhaust on this engine. Pair that with a high flow cap from ISR, which gives you another 10. It's not a test pipe and a short tube header that keeps a performance cat or high flow cat on, and you'll have a car that has about 25 to 30 extra horsepower and doesn't sound like your future 15-year-old practicing band in the basement while you wonder how you got here in the first place. The only other thing that can help wake up the engine of this car is a plenum spacer, depending on if you got the early gens, because if you got the non-rev up G35s with the DE engine, they had a really bad design. Besides that, and maybe a short throw shifter, you don't really need much more on the power side. Twin turbo application can be applied to this car, but that's where we enter
The Tune Zone.
Everybody gets excited about the Tune Zone, okay? In our 350Z video, we talked about this a little bit. And if you're already teasing the idea of turbocharging your Infiniti G35, I've seen SFR offer a kit for about $7,000. I've seen AAM offer one for about $11,000. But with a car that's already about $6,000, I'm not really sure it's always worth it. We'd recommend putting that money into a newer platform like a 370Z and modifying that platform instead. That's just our thoughts, though. You can do whatever the hell you want. Now, I'm with you, none of this makes sense when you're trying to save money. I understand when you modify a car, it's not for an investment. We're just trying to keep you safe, okay? I swear up and down. All right, on the Jim Wolf Technologies Turbo Kit though, because it is cheaper, it gives you about 100 horsepower to the crank. It doesn't require any additional parts. Most people that get this kit love this kit. Now, we'd still recommend a tune, especially when you're spending like $8,000. Honestly, the platform and getting a turbo versus naturally aspirated, you really start diving into some serious money in this car that you can't get out of. So just be safe when you make this decision. I mean, if you go turbo, welcome to the toxic relationship. Anyway, the bread and butter, wheels, tires, and suspension, the thing that we know the most about. Because we've done this for a minute, this is probably one of the last things that you're gonna wanna do because everyone just goes into the exhaust first and forgets about everything else. So, to buck the stereotypes with this thing, when you go into the wheels and tires, we recommend going with something really quality. You can go with Graham lights, Advance, Works, things like that. If you wanna get something bigger and crazier, you certainly can. But if you wanna go something into the track-oriented side of things, we'd highly recommend Enki. You can even go into like some Ferrata and Vossen and things like that. We don't see a lot of Vossen out there on this platform anymore, but in my personal opinion, if you're going with a concave wheel for this car, go with something that's got a really straight spoke. That usually looks really cool. It makes it look like higher VIP. And if you go into something more on the JDM side, you're typically going to be looking at something that looks a little bit more of like a show setup. For coilovers, BC Racing offers the most affordable yet realistic coilover that isn't going to fall apart on you. The BR series is the most popular here, and because the G35 is heavy, the coilovers do really help you like lose most of the sluggishness you'll feel when you buy this car on its stock suspension, which ends up with tires. Now, we like, if you're on, I almost want to say a budget, but not really a budget, the Continental DWS06 Plus tires have a massive mile warranty if you plan to daily drive this car. If you're doing some drifting, we'd recommend the Nexen SU1s. And if you're tracking it, we'd recommend that you go for the Michelin Pilot Sport 4Ss. If you're looking for a square setup, you can go with a 19 by 9.5 plus 15 to 22. Depending on how much stretch, you can go from like a 235 to maybe a 255/35 tire. And if you go into staggered, 9.5 plus 12, 10.5 plus 12 with a 255/35 and 285/35 work really well. Now you can go more aggressive, but you'll be jumping into camber plates and wonky ride height and stuff like that if you go past this. You just want to be careful that the more extreme you get, usually the worse this car looks. If you're looking to run air suspension, these cars do look wicked good with it, okay? Airlift kits are around $3,300 now these days, and the installation isn't as scary as you think. But when you're thinking of going into wider wheels and tires just because you're on air, try to keep in mind that you do have a tendency to look goofy as aired up. So try to like make it look good when it's slammed, when it's aired up, and when you're driving. If you can do all of that, then you're in. So how do you modify an Infiniti G35? Easy, baby. You buy a coupe, 2005 manual for around $6,000, and you immediately check recent news articles to see if it was featured in a street takeover, because you can use that to get a better deal. If it was, take it over to Los Santos Customs and never go back. Fix your foggy headlights and remove the $60 window tint that's probably on the car. You're better off looking more stock than having like shitty half-completed mods with this car. I'm gonna be so honest with you. Clean versions of this car look incredible. So get the car PPF'd because Infiniti paint is not nice with the sun. Never has been. Remember that you're gonna be spending around $1,500 in the car before you even touch modifications, but you're buying a $7,000 car, not a $30,000 SI. Once that's done, jump into the exhaust and intake side of things, and for whatever time you plan to swap the parts out, double it. Like anytime. If you're planning a day, plan for 2 days, because the bolts will be rusted and something will be with. So double your time when you're working on this car. Then you go into the wheels and tires, which you'll love most because this is like the most satisfying part of any build. Going back to some brands that we would recommend, Graham Lights, ZR10s, one-piece Kawamis, Black Diamonds or Vossens are really good ones. I think multi-spoke wheels look best here, and you should only go with a lip if you go over fender kit. Just my personal opinion. From there, enjoy your mid-upper 200 horsepower car that is comfortable to drive, looks sharp, and can in fact slide around a corner every once in a while if you wanted to. But I swear to God, just because you can do donuts doesn't mean you should shut down intersections. Takeovers. Future G35 owners, you have a due diligence to not f this one up. So go have fun with the car. Drag race it, drift it, drive it, but be one of the few clean examples on this platform versus the million of bad examples, because there are quite a few out there right now, which is kind of making this a good deal to pick up, but also not a lot of people want to own it. But remember, if you do plan to modify your Infiniti G35, do it with Martini Works. Why? Well, because whether you're buying wheels, tires, or suspension, buy from a company that gives a shit. We're still getting the website off the ground, but we've got a super fast growing build threads page so you can learn how to build your car from people who already built your car, and you're working with real car folks that care about the community. Let us know in the comment section below what car you want us to talk about next, or what product on the G35 you want to spend us more time talking about, because we just launched the Good Old Martini Works Unbox channel. I'm Alex Martini with 2 underscores on Instagram, and we'll see you later. Adios.